This segment of our show is sponsored by the Big Oak Ranch, a place for children needing a chance.
Mom, Dad, parenting is nothing but preparing our children for this journey called life. Hi, this is John Kroll from Big Oak Ranch. After nearly 40 years of raising 2,000 children, we've learned that the society we live in today is trying to rob our children of their future. Our job is to give them a future and a hope. Our children are counting on us to show them the way.
Learn about John Croyle's new book, The 2-Minute Drill to Manhood, by visiting bigoak.org/manhood.
And during the few moments that we have left, we want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
We're back for our final segment. Let's talk about what we were talking about earlier about these kids that come into college and with big expectations and wind up getting in trouble as soon as they get there, and you expect that to be from your underclassmen and not somebody that's been there for 3 years. But at Tennessee, we have 3 players being arrested on Saturday. A.J. Johnson, who was their star linebacker this past year, and 2 freshman kids were arrested, Danny O'Brien and Dontavius Sapp. Allegedly, A.J. Johnson went out and bought them all beer because he was old enough to buy it. And so he got arrested for buying alcohol and supplying it to underage kids, which just happened to be 2 other Tennessee players.
That's kind of ironic because usually when freshmen come on a campus, the upperclassmen are telling the freshmen what to do. Hey, go get my shoes, go clean my jersey, go get my supper.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why is the upperclassmen buying them beer? What did they have to offer to make him want to buy?
I don't know. That's like we were talking about that kid from Auburn, caught down in Florida with 20 ounces of marijuana with intent, they said. And you said there were some other things they caught him with?
Well, there was a gun found in the car, but there was 2 or 3 other guys in the car with him, I think. And I didn't hear a good report as for who owned the gun. I think they were still trying to figure that out.
When was he the driver? The Bassett kid that signed with Auburn, was he the driver? I never.
Yeah,
heard
I think he was the driver.
Well, he's not even in school yet. He's still got to finish his high school year or senior year in high school.
I know, and said that Coach Malzahn had still not decided, had not made a statement yet. They said they were looking into the situation.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, and of course I hate to say this, but sometimes you got to make an example out of somebody. Pull his kid's scholarship, then that'll send a message to everybody. Because Gus seems the type of guy that he's not playing around.
Yeah, that's the same way with Butch Jones. He said the same thing. They're sending their own and people to investigate it. Well, if they've been arrested and charged, who's going to go in there and change the police's mind? One of the boosters, I guess.
I mean, it'd be different if Tennessee had just played had won a national championship and he had a little bit of influence. Of, hey, kind of let's let this slide. Because it's kind of weird. We've got this social media now with Facebook and Twitter. I'd just like to go back in time about 30 years to see what players got away with. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. What about I saw? I don't know if you've seen the story or not. It was come out this morning that Urban Meyer was at Ohio State is disappointed and upset that he didn't have the number 1 recruiting class. Well, that's not anybody's fault but your own, Urban.
All I can say is I hope there's a good heart doctor in Columbus because I got a feeling he's going to be probably needing one.
He's trying to draft Tebow again.
I know it. Urban just needs to shut up and just coach. I mean, it's obvious he can coach football because he turned, even though they didn't play anybody a whole lot, to go undefeated for 2 years is still a remarkable achievement.
At Utah?
Yeah, at Utah, and then I think he did it at Ohio State too until they lost to.
Yeah, Michigan State.
If you lose to Clemson, my gosh, you need to just. I hate to say that. I mean, I like Dabo Swinney, but I just don't think Dabo's the type of coach that if he coached in the SEC, he'd be at a job somewhere like maybe Arkansas or Georgia.
Yeah,
I don't see him in being at an Alabama, Auburn, LSU type school. But the way they lost to Clemson,
yeah,
I just. That now you know why Ohio State fans, now you know why your team doesn't get looked at a lot for the national championship. That's why.
I can't wait to see this South Carolina Clemson game after the remarks that Dabo threw at Steve Spurrier after that game. They're the first team in the state of South Carolina to win a BCS game. Well, you hadn't beat South Carolina in 3 years.
And that's one reason why he'll never be the coach at Alabama, because if you lose 5 times your rival, that's not going to look good on the resume.
I thought that was, he took that shot at Spurrier, and I can't wait. If Spurrier can beat him by 100, they're going to beat him by 100 this year. You can go ahead and put that in the bank.
I've always wondered about how some of these coaches that take shots at each other, I wonder if they just don't really like each other, if they just kind of, if they sit there and take these jabs and they call each other on Monday, say, hey, what do you think about that? What should we say next?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're promoting their program.
Well, I guess he was just proud. They've been out-recruited every year by South Carolina. They get beat every year by South Carolina, and they finally, I guess they have done something that South Carolina hadn't done, but South Carolina winds up finishing better in the final poll every year than Clemson. It's just because they're in the SEC, and Clemson's in the ACC, which is a basketball conference. So
which Clemson, they lost, I think, 2 games this year. I think they lost to Florida State and South Carolina.
That's it.
And which really, not a bad loss if you're going to lose to somebody in the national championship, but they just got drilled by Florida State.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they lost
48-6, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it was
a complete beatdown. We've been talking earlier today on the show about the difference between the SEC and the rest of the country. Everybody's tired of talking about the SEC. Well, right now there's nothing else to talk about. They had the number 1 recruiting class they had 7 of the top 10 recruiting classes. And if these other conferences want to get their name out there, they got to step up and do something.
And I think the SEC, out of 10 bowl teams, I think they went 7-3.
Yeah.
And which is not bad. I mean, because had Auburn won a national championship, that would have been 8 games.
Yeah.
Of course, Alabama choked against Oklahoma. They just kind of threw up on themselves against Oklahoma. And who was the other ACC loss? Was that
Georgia?
Georgia,
Nebraska beat
that's Mark Richt. He's just an upgraded version of Dabo Swinney, in my opinion. But can you tell I'm not a big Dabo Swinney fan? I just don't see him.
I try to like him because he's from Vestavia, from Alabama, but I don't know. I like the way that he seems to be a really good Christian guy and does a lot of stuff for his team. But as far as if you're going to go out there and run your mouth, I'm telling you that South Carolina will beat them by 100 if they can. I mean, you better be able to back it up if you're going to say something like that.
If you're going to say something about somebody, note to self, don't make sure Steve Spurrier's not the punchline.
Yeah, I know. It's Steve Spurrier and Nick Saban I believe would be the 2 coaches you would not want to say something like that about or to. Well, what about who do you think is really going to be on the hot seat this year if they don't perform this year?
I'd have to say probably either Dan Mullen or Will Muschamp. And I'm a huge Will Muschamp fan. I like him. I get on YouTube sometimes when I'm having it, when I want to just watch his rants. I mean, I still reflect back to a game in 2006 or 7 when he was the defensive coordinator at Auburn.
Yeah.
Auburn I think it was against Florida of all teams. Auburn made a defensive stand, held them on 4th down, and Muschamp met the linebacker off the sideline and headbutted him. And Muschamp didn't have a helmet on.
I remember that.
And I thought that was pretty cool. And I heard him in a radio interview the other day, and he was real subdued. He wasn't blaming. He was like, "Hey, we got things wrong this year. It's my fault. I'm the head coach, and we made some adjustments, and hopefully we're going to get that turned around." And I got to say, if Florida, I think Florida's going to have to win 9 or 10 ball games this year for him to keep his job.
Yeah.
And Dan Mullen, how he's kept his job so far. Of course they've gone to bowl games, but
and they've won some games they weren't supposed to win.
Yeah, they beat. I think they beat Ole Miss. I think
they beat Ole Miss this year.
That I think that saved his job right there, beating Ole Miss. But I would say he would be on the hot seat probably.
I think Brady Hoke at Michigan.
Oh yeah, most definitely
is going to be in trouble if he doesn't at least get to the Big Ten championship game this year. And I think they were in the top 25 recruiting again this year. And it just seems like he doesn't get the all the talent out of his players for some reason.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And also, too, as far as coaches on the hot seat, I'm going to say Bo Pelini's going to be out there.
Yeah, definitely.
In fact, if I'm the athletic director of Nebraska, I think I'm going to have me a desk drawer that's going to. I've already started to jot down about 5 or 6 names of people that, and it wouldn't surprise me, hypothetically, and of course I'm going to probably aggravate the Bama Nation by saying this, and I'm a Tide fan myself, but if I'm athletic at Nebraska, I'd pick up the phone and call Nick Saban, because to me that's one place, because Nebraska used to be the old-fashioned running game defensive, and that's what they need to get back to be successful, I think, and Nick Saban would probably be the perfect coach to do that. But
I wonder why Kirby Smart hadn't been. I mean, a couple of years ago, his name was thrown around for every head coaching job that came open.
I think that window of opportunity for Kirby is about to close, especially with the way the collapse of the football team defensively. I didn't have a problem with Doug Nussmeier as a play caller. Now, I know there were some things he did that Nick Saban didn't like, but the last 2 years, Alabama's offensive numbers have been the best we've ever had.
Yeah,
I know a lot of it had to do with some of the talent we had, but if I was Nick Saban, I think I'd have to just swallow some humble pie, pick up the phone, because Bill Oliver would have stopped Oklahoma's offense. And I like Kirby, but I think that, of course, they had some players hurt, and not make an excuse in their defense, but if the defense doesn't rebound with a solid year this year, I think that window for Kirby, I think he had his opportunity a couple years ago, especially when he interviewed for the Auburn job, which I think that worked out well for Auburn, because I don't think Auburn would play for the national championship if Kirby had been the coach.
No.
But it's really interesting to see how that goes.
Speaking of the national championship, looking at these recruiting classes and looking at who's coming back next year, and the way too early preseason top 25, and there's a team that nobody's really talking about out there that even during this recruiting cycle that next year is going to be, I think, one of they'll be in the playoffs, I believe, and that's Oregon. I mean, I know that they lost Anthony Thomas, who had the world-class speed and everything, but Marcus Mariota's coming back, and he would have probably won the Heisman this year if he hadn't got hurt. And it seems like every year they either got to beat Stanford or Oregon State to make it to the Pac-12 championship game and play a weaker team from the South. And if Marcus Mariota stays healthy with the recruiting class, I know they weren't in the top 25, but if they got the players that they needed, I think Oregon is going to be somebody to reckon with before the season's over.
I agree. If Oregon's going to do anything, this 14 playoff thing I think will help them, because the last couple of years Oregon lost a game in a week at a time when they shouldn't have lost, or when they couldn't afford to lose, and that hurt them in the rankings. But I think if you see a 1 or 2 loss Oregon team there at the end of the season and they win the Pac-12 championship, it's possible they could be in that 14 mold. Now, I will say this, though. I think Arizona put the blueprint to beating Arizona, because they beat Oregon.
Yeah, they beat them good.
Beat them by 42-16.
Yeah.
And for a Rich Rodriguez defensive coach team to beat them like that, just think, you think that some of these other defensive coordinators, the top 2 defensive coordinators in the country, would have been able to be more consistent with that in beating them. But like I said, Oregon, they got the Mariota back, and they'll be a hard team to reckon with.
They'll be getting a new defensive coordinator for the first time in 20 years, I think. It's been a long time since was it Aliota? Was that his name? The defensive coordinator, and he retired. That may help them.
I was about to say that may help them.
They get that out of the way. I mean, just like when they played Auburn in the national championship game, they were averaging, 53, 56 points a game, and Auburn comes in with one of the worst defenses in the SEC and shut them down. But, that's just one of those. That's my sleeper team for next year is Oregon. I still think in that 14 playoff there'll be one, if not 2, SEC schools in there, and then you're going to have, I don't know, maybe somebody from the Big Ten. I don't know if it'll be Ohio State or not.
I think the Ohio State's going to be spectators this year, and that I think just looking at it,
be crying again.
I think Florida State, Oregon, the winner of the Alabama Auburn game, and possibly another SEC team will be the 4, and it possibly could be the loser of the Iron Bowl, depending on how the situation. Yeah. Just depending. But I think there'll be 2 SEC teams to make that 14 playoff this year.
The way the SEC West schedule, I was looking at the other day, there's a really good possibility that Alabama, Auburn, and LSU could all wind up with 1 loss after the Iron Bowl, after the season's over.
All to each other.
All to each other. And, who's to say? I know they won't put all 3 of them in there, but it probably should be.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that committee, how they look at things, and especially if it comes down to if there's 2 SEC teams that are neck and neck and they played a classic game, so to speak, and one one team over the other, defeated the other one in overtime by maybe a point or two. Like I said, it'd be kind of interesting to see how that plays out, and it'd be kind of interesting to see how Alabama is looked at, because they've been in the hunt for the last 3 or 4 years, but because of the way they declined in the last 2 games of this year, if you've got a one-loss Alabama team versus an undefeated, let's say Ohio State, who do they give the edge to? Schedule-wise, I know our SEC schedules are just a little bit better. We got Florida coming into Tuscaloosa, but we still, I think, have to play Kentucky, I think.
Well, Ohio State doesn't play anybody.
Yeah, I know it.
Maybe in the Big Ten championship game. Well, that's about all the time we got this week. Next week we're going to talk about what we left off with here, about the 4-team playoff and the committee that has been chosen to run the 4-team playoff, and whatever might happen this week in the world of college football. Hey, go out and support our sponsors. Go visit them online or give them a call, because without them, none of this would be possible. We thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you next week.